Welcome to tonight's session on Don't Quit, Overcoming Life's Obstacles. Last week, if you were with us, you had the opportunity to hear from Sister Linda Stansberry as she shared her testimony and her journey. Life threw her an amazing curveball. She talked about that journey and what it meant to have support, even what it felt like to want to withdraw or retreat. But she was able to find the strength, community, and faith to stay, to stick, and not to quit. Tonight, we go deeper in our journey. Our sister Michelle Williams will share her testimony of what it means to grow through life's changes and not to quit.
Hello, my name is Michelle Williams. I have overcame a lot of situations and because of life, and that has taught me not to quit. It began back in 1987 in November. My daughter was born. While she was in the hospital and I delivered her father passed. That was my start of me not to quit. From that point on, I was in survival mode. I was a single mother, trying to navigate my way through this life. I was a young mother, but I knew I wanted to give her the life that she deserved. So in my young age, I started working 2 jobs. I was a hairstylist, a licensed stylist, and I went through my jobs. I've always worked too. I needed benefits for her. So that's what I did. When she was 5 years old, I met my first husband, which she only knew him as Daddy. Because remember, her father died while I had her in the hospital. We had a good marriage, a 14-year marriage of what was, to me, a blessing. After we met, we dated for a year and a half, we got married. My daughter was in the wedding, so was his 2 daughters. So we had 3 girls. They were not raised in the same home. They resided with her mother, their mother, and Candace resided in a home with us. We raised them together. We did family vacations. We did family gatherings. We did vacations with just him and I. Candace was really close with her families, really close with the girls. We never differentiated them. I saw them as my children also. As life went on, I decided to go back to college to get my degree. When Candace was in middle school, he was there supporting me, along with my mother and my stepfather and my grandmother and my other mom. As time went on, around year 7, we started to have problems. It was okay. It was major, but the Lord did not tell me to leave at that time. So I decided to stay, as any woman that loved her husband would. I forgave him. We moved forward. In my eyes, everything was fine. 3 years down the road, we hit another stop in the relationship. And strange things started to happen. I saw them. My daughter at that time was in her last year of high school. As she went through her last year of high school, I tried to keep a lot of the problems away from her so she could successfully complete school and start to go to college. So in the midst of us preparing for her to go to college, the problems became more and more upfront. So I had to keep all of that from her because we had to be happy for her that she was going away to school. The third month of her in college now, we drove her to school, we unpacked her, she started classes. The third month, my husband and I separated. It was a awful separation and devastation to be in my family. I was blindsided. I didn't see this coming. Yes, there were things that happened, but I never could see us getting divorced. That was far from my mind. At that time, I had no other way to go. My mother was deceased at this time. So I decided to get some counsel from our bishop. I remember emailing him and asking him, Bishop, what do I do? What am I to do at this point? Because at this time, he was out of the home. I was there alone. My daughter was in college, and I had to bear this weight by myself. So Bishop emailed me back, always told me to hold on, always told me to be strong. Michelle, you have to be strong for your daughter because she has to see the strength in you. And that's where you handle the situation is how she's going to handle every obstacle in her life. I will never forget that. So days and nights were long. The nights were long because at this point, I was the only one in the house. And I remember talking to God, Lord, it's you and I. I know that you won't leave me. How am I going to make this work? I have a child in college who is just starting. How am I going to make it through this? I'm asking you, God, to give me wisdom to make sound decisions and to not give up, because Bishop told me that I have to be strong. So I'm asking you, God, to give me the strength to make it through this. And whatever you tell me to do at this point, I have to accept that. Whether that was to bring her home to go to college and finish because she was away. And we all know that's more expensive than being home. I was okay with that. If that's what God had us, I was okay. I was okay with relocating out of my home to an apartment if that's what I had to do. Because at this point, I didn't know what to do. We got the home together. I didn't get the house by myself. So now I have to figure out, how do I make it by myself versus with my spouse? And all of this weight was dropped in my lap. So now I have to navigate my life and figure out, how am I going to get through this? And yes, it seems easy to say, well, Michelle, you work and you do this and you do that. But when you're used to being with someone and that rug's pulled from underneath of you, now you're in survival mode again. So days were long, like I said. Nights were scary because my protection was gone. But I had God. And I knew every day in that house that I could talk to him and that he would have my full attention because nobody else was there. So while my daughter was away in college and I'm home trying to navigate life, God did give me wisdom because I had time to think things clearly, to make a plan. And at that time, I had to figure out, okay, now is your time to elevate your career. What could you do to make more money? Because now I'm in survival mode. I have to make more money, and I did. I applied for a teaching position at a hair school. I got the position. So then I was teaching. In the midst of my separation, now I'm teaching. It was very hard to concentrate because my ex-husband had stopped at the school maybe once or twice to do things like give me the papers to sell the house when I'm still living in the house. How do you do that? So with all this going on, I still had to figure out some things. So now I have to get a lawyer. Well, where am I going to get the money from to get a lawyer? But I trusted God that He was going to provide and He would make a way. All through the years of teaching, I decided now I want to go and apply for another position as a director at another school. So I could see the road. I could see the road. I could see the light now. I was able to go to get the job. And at that time, I said, okay, if I can get this job, then I'll apply to keep my home. Because now I'm still in the house. We're still separated, but not divorced yet. So I did that, did the paperwork, did everything I had to do, and I was approved. And I just felt like God never left me. Even though He had all these obstacles were around me, and it never got easier. Ways were made, but the process of the separation was bad. It was a terrible divorce. It was ugly. We never got along. He threatened me a few times with a few things, but I withstood all of that. Anything I had to do to make sure that my mind was sane so my child could graduate college. So around the last year of her college, this is when the divorce was going to be final. And I said, okay, God, you've allowed her to stay at school. You have allowed me to stay in this home. You've provided me with another job, a better job with benefits and everything that I needed to survive. Please let her graduate and finish at least this first course, and we'll figure out the rest later. She graduated in May. My divorce was final in May. And from that moment on, I felt free. I didn't feel weighed down by this weight of a broken home and a broken family. I was beginning to see independence and see that I could do this with the help of God, of course. So as time went on, this is now May going into, she's graduated now. She's making plans to go for her graduate degree, but not until January. She said, Mom, I want to take off a semester. I said, okay. And at that time, now we're going into the fall, I meet a young man named Tony. I was looking for a car at the time. He worked at a dealership. Very handsome, very, very well dressed, spoke well, very attractive. And he said something to me that I was not expecting. Like, you're very nice looking. How would you like to go out? And I'm like, he's just saying this because I'm trying to get a car. One thing turned into another. Time went on. We dated for 5 years. I couldn't believe this was happening because I was in no way, shape, or form looking to be remarried. And 5 years later, we got married in 2011. My mother was ill. She was in a nursing facility. My grandmother got sick overnight and they had to rush her to the emergency room. And 2 weeks later, she passed. I took my mother to the funeral and I asked them to watch her because they were really, really close, to keep an eye on my mom. And a month later, my mother passed. I'm like, wow, God. As soon as something great happens now, this has happened. So I've lost my mother and my grandmother now in 1 month. And this is in 2011. I took a year off of work to handle my mother's business. And in 2012, I said, okay, I'm going back to work. And I found a salon. The Lord told me to go find a space. I'm like, God, find a space? I don't have the money for that. My daughter just graduated and, just got this house. So he told me to find a space and I did. And that was it. That was the beginning of Hair Trends by Michelle Salon. So I acted when the Lord told me to go. Didn't know it was a business that I had been trying to get for over 15, 20 years. But now it's finally happened. In the midst of that, 2 years later, my husband, my now husband, and I were married 2 years later in October of 2014. And looking over all of those years, the Lord gave me the strength to persevere through all of these obstacles. I never thought I wasn't going to make it. I just didn't know how I was going to make it. But he ensured me, along with my bishop, to stay strong and that the Lord would be with me through this entire process. He was. Life still has its obstacles, but I'm still here and I never gave up. And because of that, nothing seems impossible to me now, no matter what. If you trust God with everything in you, no matter how much word you do know that He's a provider. And He tells us that by the provisions that He's made. So what can I say about my life and to encourage others? Never quit, because you don't know what God has in store. Keep your eyes on the prize and just trust and have faith that He's going to take you through it. You never know what's on the other side of the door. And there are blessings to come, but you have to believe it and you have to stay the course. Thank you.
Wow. Still here, and you never gave up. That was a very moving and powerful testimony, Michelle. I'm going to come back to you, but I want to get Miss Linda and Deaconess Clara, what are your initial thoughts as you heard Michelle share her testimony? Miss Linda?
Michelle seemed like she's just gone through so much. And it was just nice and refreshing to see how you knew where your source of your strength came from. And you held on. You held on.
Deaconess Clara?
I heard perseverance. You never gave up. You just persevered. You said, I knew I was gonna make it. I just didn't know how I would make it. And so you had the spirit within you, and God was feeding you and assuring you that you were going to get there. You just had to hold on, and that's what you did. I just see you, like a roller coaster. You just hold on, and you're going down and up. I just see you, or saw you, were holding on. Yes.
Thank you. You said a phrase a couple of times, and it stuck with me. Even though all hell was being thrown at you, from the death of you had just given birth and experienced the death, through a tumultuous marital relationship, mom and grandmom passed in 1 month, and I heard the phrase, even though. Talk about even though. Talk about that. I'm staying, I'm sticking, I'm not giving up, even though it's crazy all around me.
So that is just like the middle of my life story. I have a whole nother chapter that nobody knows about. So I've endured a lot. But thanks to my mother who raised me in the church, I got to know God and got saved at 14. So I always knew where my help came from. I never really questioned my situations that happened. I think about them, but it was never a question as to God, why did you do this? Or why did that happen? It just seemed like it was just a part of my life. But I have been told several times how strong I am. I don't think of myself as being that strong. Think people go through a lot more than I've been through. So I just always saw God turn the situation around. I've had a wonderful childhood. I just had things happen, just like anybody else. But I just believe that it won't always be like this. So it's even though that happened, God makes a way. God shows up. He's faithful. He showed me over and over again. And this has just been my testimony throughout my whole life. Like I said, that was just a portion. What you've heard is a portion. There is a life prior to my daughter being born that nobody even knows about. I've been through a lot. So not tragic situations, just a lot of devastating situations. So I just never gave up. Just always believe it's just a light at the end of the tunnel. And he always makes a better way.
Yeah. Let's talk about something else you mentioned. You said, God didn't tell me to leave. Talk about the importance of listening for God's voice.
Okay. So at that time, I had a right to leave the marriage because of what happened. And it would have been okay with God to leave because of what happened, because he said that's a reason why you can divorce. But I prayed to God and asked him, God, what is it that you want me to do? Should I leave? Or should I stay? He said, it's not time yet. And so I stayed, believing that this situation would change. Even though I was very hurt, I just stayed in believing that the situation would get better. So we just never know the plan, but we just have to listen and pay attention to what he's saying.
Yeah. On the other side of that, I would imagine there were a lot of other voices giving you other advice. How did you navigate listening for God's voice and the temptation to listen to those other voices?
Well, actually, it was a group, we had a group of friends, all of us were married. They were angry, but they never said, you need to do X, Y, Z. Thank God for my friends. They never gave me that kind of advice. So I really had to make the decision, but I always believed in making a wise decision. So I really had to think it out and really be in prayer to listen for what God has to say. Even though it doesn't make sense, it didn't make sense, but he knows best.
Yeah.
So I didn't have the outside influence, really. I would have did this, I would have did that. But I just thank God that I, never had to go through that.
Yeah.
Where I had a lot of things, people in my ear telling me to do other things. I never really had to go through that.
Yeah, it's a blessing to have, as you shared, a blessing to have people in your corner. Even Deaconess Clara or Miss Linda, what about you all in terms of having people in your corner? When you went through your situations, how important is that to have someone in your corner?
Oh, I think it's major, because you do hear other voices sometimes, even in your head, as well as some other people that have some negative things to come up with, or trying to guide you in a certain direction. But like you said, when you know God's voice, you know the difference, because you feel him with your heart, not just with your head.
Yeah.
So that kind of guides you in that direction. But that's important. You got to have somebody there for you. It's major. Yeah.
Deaconess Claire, what about you?
God uses people to encourage you as well. So those voices of encouragement are essential to getting through those tough seasons. So I think those voices of encouragement are essential, because they're not always directing you in which path you should take, but they have your back. They've got your back. Whichever way you go, I've got your back. I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm here for you, and that's essential to getting through.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Michelle, I want to ask about your daughter. You mentioned that things started to become more apparent in the process. How did you manage her exposure?
Oh my goodness. So I do a really good job of holding stuff in. And I really needed her to concentrate in school. I didn't want her to become overwhelmed and stressed. And she was just starting her college experience because of what I was going through. So I managed to keep as much as I could away from her. And she knew something was wrong, but she didn't know what it was. So she would, say, Mom, you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And she knew something, but she didn't. I tried not to consume her with sadness in my voice or just talking about, issues. I just wanted her to succeed.
Yeah.
So, I did everything in my power to keep it away from her because I didn't want it. All I could foresee is me throwing my weight on her and then she would fail. That's all I could see. So I'm like, no, keep this away from her so she can concentrate and she can do well and she'll finish.
Yeah.
So I managed to keep that away from her as long as I possibly could. I think I probably laid it all out, maybe her third year of college. And she wasn't like shocked when she knew something was happening, but, at least they gave her time to focus on her schoolwork.
Sure. Talk a little bit about how your relationship evolved, because you mentioned that your conversation with Bishop was about, part of the things he shared with you was being able to show her how to handle things in life. How did what you went through shape how you interact with her and even how she handles things?
Oh my goodness. So I think she's a little warrior more than me. But she's strong. She thinks things out. She might get a little stressed, but after she calms down, she's like, no, I'm gonna do this, and this. And I'll never forget what Bishop said to me, because he's so right. Because I can look at her today and see how she handles certain situations. I'm like, wow, she is so much stronger than me. And I really thought I was strong, but she seems so much stronger than me because she can handle the situation. Once she calms down, she got it. So that was like the best advice he could have ever given me, because your children watch what you do and they watch how you handle situations. And she told me something about 2 weeks ago. She said, Mom, you and one other lady we know, she said, I've never seen nobody handle a divorce like that.
Wow.
I mean, just handled it with grace. I never heard her say that. And it just reminded me of what Bishop said. And I said, you know what? If he wouldn't have never told me that, she wouldn't be saying this right now. But she watched. She said, you handled that with grace. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're all parents in here. Deaconess Clara, having a child who's around as you go through things, Michelle talked about handling it with grace and hearing that later on. Even as you go through stuff, and how important is it to model for your daughter?
It's essential. As our children watch us, again, they're coming up with their tools as to how they might handle things. And so when we lean on the Lord and allow them to see us pray or ask God for help, that's an example. When we show our strength, and even when we show our vulnerability, that, yeah, we can bend too, and we can break, but we can bounce back from it, then they know that, okay, even if I fall down, I can still get up. That things will come, things will challenge me, but I can come out of it. So it's so important to let them see you come out of it.
Miss Linda, what about you? Modeling for your daughter.
I think it's the exact same concept that you're saying. But the most important thing is letting them see that you can get down, but you can get back up. That's just major, because they're going to face so many obstacles in this world, and it's a new world for them. So I know it's not easy. And my daughter and I, we talk about that a lot. And just being an example.
Yes.
That's major. Your kids are going to mock whatever they see you do.
Yeah. Miss Linda talked about getting down and then getting back up. You subsequently remarried, but you also mentioned your business, Hair Trends by Michelle. Talk about the feeling of that you experienced when you were able to open the business.
Oh my goodness. So I've tried 3 previous attempts to open a salon
Wow.
in my previous marriage. One time I just got cold feet. One time just wasn't the right time, and I don't know what happened the other time, but this was literally a surprise because I wasn't thinking about opening a salon. I just wanted to start back working. And it's funny how it happened because I applied for a position, and you know how they supposed to call you back and let you know somebody else supposed to call you back for a second interview, but it never happened. And so I called them back, and I'm like, hey, somebody was supposed to call me back. And they said, oh, well, he's no longer with the company. I'm like, oh my God. So the Lord just said, go find a building. Go find a building. Go find a building. And I listened with nothing because it's not like I was saving to get the salon, or I just wasn't prepared. So I went and I looked, and the first location that I looked at is the one I'm in right now. And it's 10 years later.
Amen.
But it's just amazing how you really have to listen when he tells you to go. Because had I not went, I might not have it now. And I went blind. I had no money saved. I had no plan because I had started doing a business plan years ago, but that was lost. I literally had nothing. And I went on faith, believing that he sent me here. And I remember when I started, the day that we opened on May the 2nd. And 2 weeks prior to that, or a month prior, the 3 months, the 3 month span that they give you to kind of move in. You know, I'm looking for staff and looking for stylists. And all these people said he was gonna come. I was like, good, I got like 4 stylists. The day that I opened, I had 0 because everybody had reneged and like, Michelle, I'm not gonna start, I'm gonna stay where I am. I'm like, okay, God. I'm in here blind by myself. Like, I'm gonna go because you sent me here. So I started by myself. I was the only one there for a month. And he sent them one by one. So.
Yeah, I am, Michelle, I want to thank you for taking the time to share your testimony, to speak a story about resilience and refusing to give up. But also, I think you did something else today. I think that you reminded us all about the importance of listening for God's voice. Even when it might not make sense to others, even when we don't know the how, but we know that it will because God said so. And so as we close out today's segment, I want to thank you for that. And I also want to encourage our listening audience to listen for God's voice, to listen as you go through whatever life throws at you, to understand that you may not see the how, you may not see the when, but know that if God said it, it will come to pass. You've just got to hang on, even though, and don't quit.
Difficult things is just the unbelief that something like this has happened and to be able to accept it. So, of course, I believed that he would come walking through the door and, hi, honey, and that didn't happen. But as the reality of it set in, and I just couldn't believe it, I remember saying to my mom, I can't believe he's gone. I just can't believe it. And it was following the services, and she said, yes, you can believe it. You saw them bury him. You can believe it, you just can't accept it yet. And I had to realize that that's where I was. I was at a point of not being able to accept what had happened.